Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video, I'm going to show you guys how to play Carcassonne, Hunters and Gatherers by Z-Man Games. Now, I'm under the assumption that if you're watching this video, you most likely already know how to play Carcassonne, at least the original Carcassonne. Okay, so we're not going to focus too much on the normal rules of Carcassonne that basically make Carcassonne Carcassonne. We're mostly going to focus on the rules for this game, how you're going to score points, what certain tiles do in this particular Carcassonne, Hunters and Gatherers. Now, if you've never played Carcassonne before, this is not a good first choice. I would recommend either trying the first one, as in the original Carcassonne, or maybe even one of the other standalone expansions like Carcassonne Safari or Carcassonne Amazonas, because this one has a lot more going on with it than those particular Carcassonnes. There are special tiles in this game that basically will add new ways of scoring and can change up that whole scoring the way you normally score in Carcassonne. There's definitely some tiles here that can mess with that a little bit and can confuse you if you've never played Carcassonne before. So let's get started. Let me show you guys how to play Carcassonne Hunters and Gatherers. Now, you'll find the starting tile with an orange or a reddish C like this. You'll separate it from all of the tiles that have a white C, okay? And then obviously you're going to shuffle these. You'll also find special tiles called, I have a hard time pronouncing it, but I think it's like pronounced menhir. These are menhir tiles. There's quite a few of these, and they are all like going to add new ways of scoring. So this can definitely confuse if you've never played Carcassonne before. Even if you've played Carcassonne, there can be some tiles in here that can be confusing. And so I'm going to show you how to play this game by actually playing the game. Now, you're not going to see every little bit of the game, but when a tile comes up, when a possible scoring takes place, then I will basically show you that part of it and explain how you're going to score, why you're going to score, and that kind of thing. But first, let's just talk about where you can place meeples down. So the meeples are tribesmen in this game, and these are your meeples here. And when you place a tile down, of course, you still have to place a tile down that is going to match the other side, or all sides, depending on how many tiles are out. So like this side matches. This side does not match. But, for instance, this side matches. And so you're going to be placing out tiles down. And then when you place a tile down, you have the option of placing a meeple, if you have one, depending on what you placed and where you can place it. Now, if you place it face down in a grassland on the tile that you just placed, it becomes a hunter. And all hunters will not score you any points until the end of the game. You also won't get them back. So putting down a hunter right away will certainly limit how much possibilities of scoring in this game. It will definitely limit that. You don't want to do that too fast or too soon. It's best to wait and see when there's a big grassland with tons of animals involved. But, for instance, you could place it on this river face up. So, for instance, I could place it here. Okay? If I placed it there, it would stay there until the river was completed. Now, you complete a river in two ways in this game. You'll complete a river if both sides of the river has a lake at the end. So for instance, if I was to place my meeple right here on this tile, it's between two lakes. This tiny little river, which you can barely see, is between two lakes. So I would automatically score points for that. I would score 1 point for every tile that makes up the river. So in this case, it would be 2 tiles, because there's just a smidge of river here, and there's obviously just a smidge of river here, okay? I would also score 3 points, for 1 point for each fish that is in the lake as well. And you'll see there's 2 fish here and there's 1 fish here. So I would score 5 points and I'd get my meeple back right away. So that's one way you're going to score points. Obviously in Carcassonne, you can't place a meeple down on a river that has a meeple on the same river. But sometimes rivers that weren't originally connected will have a meeple, or should I say a fisherman, on this river, which isn't connected to this river, but then when someone places down a tile that connects the two, well now, they are on the same river, and that's allowed, and then they would share victory points, just like in regular Carcassonne, if you were playing with roads instead of rivers. That's basically the same idea. So that's one way you can score points. You can also, let's say if this was the forest this was the tile I placed down, and I placed my meeple here in the forest, he would become a gatherer, okay? And then you're going to score 2 points for every tile that makes up your forest, okay? So once a forest is completed, you'll get your meeple back. You'll score 2 points for every forest that makes up that forest, every tile that makes up that forest. And then you'll notice that on this tile, there's a stone monument called a menhir, okay? And it's even got some sort of like cave painting like thing on it, right? When you complete a forest that has at least one of these monumental stone things, menhirs, you're going to get an additional turn, okay? Whoever is the one that obviously ended the forest. So that's how that's going to work. Yes, so whoever places a menhir down that completes the forest will get the additional turn. Meaning, if for instance, there was a meeple of a separate color that wasn't yours, it was another player's color, and they were going to score points on the forest, okay? But you didn't have any meeples in the forest, but you're the person who finished the forest with the menhir, then you would get the additional turn. Your opponent would not. Your opponent would get the points. You would both get your meeples back, of course, but you would be the one to get the additional turn. Even if there were other menhirs in the forest, whoever finishes the forest with a menhir is going to get the extra turn. So that means if you finish a forest and it doesn't have a menhir, then obviously you're not going to get that extra turn. So it has to be that equation. Now, if there is more than one menhir, you still only get 1 additional turn. If you complete a separate forest with another menhir after you place that special tile, you still do not get the additional turn. You just get 1 turn. So you're going to take a turn, and then if you were the one to finish a forest with a menhir, you're going to get 1 additional turn. But you'll never get more than that, okay? At least not until later on when somebody else is gone, and then it's your turn again, and you complete a forest, and, you know, then that happens again, then yes, you'll get to take additional turn. Now, those tiles are going to be these tiles here. You're going to place one of these down, and you're not going to get to choose. You just take the top one off, just like with the other tiles, and then you get to place it, and then, obviously, you know, you'll place it down on your turn. And if you can, you'll place a meeple on it. Now, some of these tiles are going to score you points right away, whether you place a meeple or a camp, because there are like these tents, camps here. Regardless, you're going to score points sometimes as well, and we'll talk about them as we come to them. But that's basically how that's going to work. So, let me go ahead and get started playing the game, and I will catch up with you guys when I come to a point in the game where I can start scoring points, or my opponent, Manta, can start scoring points. Okay? So, I'll see you guys in a moment. When you guys see me next, there'll definitely be more tiles on the table. All right, so welcome back. So, now we actually have some tiles out, and so I can explain a few more things regarding hunters and gatherers here. So, I just placed this tile here and decided to place my meeple because it's complete, and I'm going to get my meeple back right away after I score the points. Now, because I completed this tile with this special stone here, this menhir, I'm also going to get an additional turn as well as score the points because I'm the one that had the meeple in this forest. I'm going to score 2 points for every tile that this forest makes up, which is 3. So 2, 4, and 6. So I'm going to score 6 points for doing that, and then I'm going to get my meeple back. And then I'm going to get my additional turn, which is to take one of these special menhir tiles, and I get to place it down for my additional turn. Now, this particular tile here has a group of mushrooms on it. So for every group of mushrooms in a completed forest, once a forest is complete, you're going to score 3 additional points for each group of mushrooms. So if this forest here gets bigger and bigger, and there's more and more groups of mushrooms, I'm going to score a lot of points potentially. So I better place it here so that way I can get, obviously, the points for it, since this is my forest right here. I'm going to place it like this, so that way the river is going this way. And I'm also going to place my meeple on this part of the river here, so that way, if I can complete this river section here, I'll get my meeple back right away, because a river is completed by basically having 2 lakes on each side, or 2 forests on each side, or vice versa, on each side of a river. Or if, for instance, you are able to loop a river around on itself, that would also complete a river too. And then you would get your meeple back and score points. Now, tents are different. Tents are actually going to score you points at the end of the game, but depending on where you can place a hut, depends on a couple of things. First of all, when you are looking at this river here, this might be different. This might be a separate river for meeples, and this might be a separate river for meeples, and over here might be a separate river for meeples. But this is all one big river system. And when you place a tent down or a hut down on a river, you have to first make sure there are no other huts on the same river system. So for instance, if my opponent had a hut on this river system up here, I would not be able to place a hut. If I was to place this tile down, I would not be able to place a hut on this particular river system because he's already got a hut on this river system. Now, the cool thing is you can place a hut even if your opponent has a meeple on the same river, okay? That is allowed. So for instance, if my opponent wanted to, if he had placed this tile right here, and he could actually legally place a hut on this river, even though I have a fisherman here, that would be allowed. Same thing with me. If I had placed this tile down and placed this hut here, I would still be allowed. That would be allowed as well. Now, you don't get huts back until the end of the game, but if you somehow are able to build 2 separate river systems and put a hut of each color, meaning one player's got this river system and one player's got this river system over here, and then eventually they connect, then you're going to tie for points if you have the same amount of huts. If one player has more huts, though, in the same river system, then they will score points only. So, for instance, over here, this is a separate river system. And in the purpose of scoring purposes, this here, even though there's not much of a river here because it's mostly a lake, this is a separate river system from here. So, for instance, if this was here already, my opponent had placed this tile, he could still place his hut right here. And you can also place huts on lakes too, by the way. You would also get that as well, okay? That's what would happen. he would be allowed to do that because this is still a separate river system from here. And then once this was connected, which it most likely would be, then obviously you would have 2 huts on the same river system, and we would tie at the end of the game. So we would score the same points, basically. So that's how that's going to work with huts. That's how they work. So anyways, but yes, that's what I wanted to explain thus far. So I will get back to you. You will get back to me, and you'll see more tiles on here once I have some more other ways of scoring points. I will talk about, we still have to talk about how to score points when you complete a river. We still need to talk about, obviously, how to score points at the end of the game for the variety of things. And there's still lots of menhir tiles. So when we get to the menhir tiles, we'll talk about them too. Alright, so I just placed this tile here, which has a lake on it, but it does complete this river system here. So I get 2 points, 1 point for each tile that makes up this river, not river system, and then I get 1 point for every fish that makes up this river. So it would include the 2 lakes that basically are part of this river. So it's these 2 here. So I would score 5 points and I would get my meeple back. That's how you're going to score points. That's how you're going to score points for rivers. You're going to score 1 point for each tile that makes up the river, plus 1 additional point for each fish that is part of the river. Now that I've placed this down, I'm also going to go ahead and place a tent or a hut on this lake here, because you can do that, obviously. And so now this river system is mine. My opponent earlier, Manta, he placed a tent, a hut over here, so he can start, obviously, working this river around. And who knows, maybe it'll even intersect with this one at some point. Now, I should also emphasize, whoever places the tile down that completes a forest that has a stone menhir, it doesn't matter who placed the tile down that had the stone menhir. It only matters on who placed the tile down. So for instance, I already had a maple here in this forest, and it was on this tile with this menhir. My opponent, Manta, he placed this tile here. So it allowed me to score 2 points for each of these, obviously, and get my maple back, but it allowed him to get the additional turn because he's the one that completed the forest, not me. So it doesn't matter if there's a menhir on the tile that you place, it just matters if there's a menhir in the forest. That's what matters. So that's what happened earlier. And so this was actually the tile that gave him the additional turn. It has a nice mammoth on it. I guess mammoths are hard to get on the regular tiles, but there wasn't anything super special about the tile other than that he placed. So when you see us next, there'll be more tiles out.